All right, in this lesson here, what we're going to do is talk about modifiers and the modifier stack. Modifiers are going to play a very important role in the construction of your scenes, as we're not going to be working with standard primitives forever. If you think about it, up to this point, all we've really shown you how to do is just create some very basic objects, how we can move them around, how we can select them, how we can group them, how we can even duplicate them. But now it's time to take a look at how we can go about modifying these objects. So let's start out by creating, I don't know, let's pick on a cylinder perhaps. So make something nice and small, maybe like that. And with the object in creation mode right now, we've already seen that I can come over here and I can continue adjusting parameters before I move on to another object. Because I adjust the height, etc. But once I right click, all of these parameters are gone. Well, if we need to go back and change those parameters, we need to modify our geometry, basically. It's geometry that's now been created, not geometry that's being created during the creation process.
Right, so now we need to modify something that's already pre-existing.
Exactly, and to go about doing that, you know, we've been working over here on the command panel from the Create panel. Now I'm going to come over and get you comfortable with the Modify panel.
Okay.
So here's the Modify panel. Check this out. Parameters. Ah.
Oh, look, they just got moved over here.
Yeah, they just got moved over here, basically. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this all works. First thing we can come in and change the name. I mean, this shows up everywhere. Over here on the Create panel, we can do it right here. Modify panel, we can do it here. I mean, it's all over the place, okay? And the color as well. The next thing we have is a drop-down. And this drop-down is a special list showing us all of the modifiers that we can apply to the object that is currently selected in our scene. And we've got selection modifiers, we've got world space modifiers, and we've got object space modifiers. Now, there are a lot of modifiers.
Oh, yeah.
We are not going to be talking about all the modifiers in this lesson right here. The idea is just basically to go through and get you comfortable with working with the general process of modifiers, not an introduction to what every single modifier does.
All right.
Though you'll see how a couple of them work.
Sure.
All right, so moving on from here, we get into this large white area right here, this big box, if you will. This is an extremely important area. This is known as the modifier stack, and often it's referred to simply as the stack. From inside the stack, you are going to see a visual representation of all of the construction history that's taken place on the particular object. Right now, all we have is just a standard primitive, a cylinder, and so that is the only thing that shows currently in the stack. Now, with the cylinder currently selected, you look down here and we have a parameters rollout, and these are the parameters for this selected object, okay?
Okay.
Be it a modifier, be it an object, or whatever. With selecting it, down here you're going to see its associated parameters. So I can come back in here and make these modifications if I'd like. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at how we would go about putting a modifier on an object. Let's bend this guy. So I'll go ahead and simply scroll down here to Object Space Modifiers, find a bend, click it, and what it's going to do is it's going to apply it above whatever was selected.
Okay.
Now, in the case where we just applied this bend, it was no big deal because there was only one object in there. But at this point, if I was to come down here and select cylinder and then apply another modifier, it would apply it between the bend and the cylinder.
Okay, so it applies the next object directly above whatever you have selected.
Whatever's currently selected.
Okay.
So you saw before parameters. These are the parameters for the cylinder. I click on bend. These are the parameters for the bend. So it's real simple to go back and forth in the stack. It's just a matter of clicking.
Very nice.
Another thing that you may have noticed that took place is this orange box just appeared in your viewport. This is a gizmo. This is going to be your visual representation of what is going to happen to your geometry, if you will. So in this case, the gizmo is straight. It's just a box around your cylinder right here, so nothing fancy is happening. But if I was to come down here to the parameters rollout, to the angle attribute, and start changing this parameter right here, okay, look at that. So we're bending our geometry. And we can change the direction we want. We can change the bend axes. We can apply upper and lower limits. There's all sorts of things we can do. Okay, simple enough. Another thing I'll go ahead and point out, while we're not going to spend any great time on this, is you'll notice that a lot of modifiers have got a little plus symbol over here so that you can expand that modifier, revealing sub-components or sub-objects of the modifier. In this particular case, our sub-objects consist of the gizmo itself and the center. Okay, the center is going to be where this whole bending is being calculated from, and the gizmo allows us to go in there and actually move the gizmo around and the center as well. In other words, watch this. If I was to start moving this up, look at the effect that we're getting.
Oh, wow.
If I was to start moving this forward, If I was to start moving it backwards, you can see we start getting all these different effects. If I take the center and start moving just the center around, again, different effects, okay?
Okay.
And this will become more important later on when we start applying different modifiers into the whole mix. But just know that we can get down here to these various sub-objects. Another thing you'll notice is we have a little light bulb right beside it. This light bulb allows us to simply turn that modifier off. Sometimes you're going to put a modifier on there and it's going to have a very subtle change or perhaps even a drastic change, and you may need to temporarily disable it to rather A, see what kind of effect it's really having, or B, maybe speed your system up temporarily.
Okay.
And so you just click on that. It's all done. Okay. Another thing that's very important when working with these modifiers is to understand how the show end results works. This is a very handy button. If I was to come back down here to the cylinder, show end results is currently turned on, so I can see everything throughout the stack, the final end result of what the stack is going to give me in relation to this geometry. If I was to turn this off, the way it works is we're going to see everything the stack calculates all the way up to the point of the selected object in the stack.
All right.
So in this particular case, let's go ahead and add between the cylinder and the bend a twist, and I'll go ahead first and turn off the show end results. So I'm going to expand this, and while I can scroll down hunting for twist, I can also simply type T in, which is going to jump us all the way down, in this case, to taper. Hit T again, tessellate, and keep hitting it a few times until I jump down to twist, and I can simply hit Enter on the keyboard to apply the modifier.
Very nice.
Now, as you can see, the modifier has indeed been applied between the cylinder and the bend, and he's got his own set of parameters. So if I wanted to, I can begin twisting. Okay, so look at that. I now have a twisted cylinder.
That's really cool.
Now, if I come up here to the bend, now I have a bent, twisted cylinder. Make sense?
Very nice. So it's like it's applying these from bottom to top.
That's right. Now, if I wanted to, I can go ahead and turn show end results back on, and even though you'll see that my gizmo for twist is still straight up and down, that my final result of the geometry is indeed bent over because the bend coming next is going to do that to it.
Okay, so these are not being applied to the gizmo, just to the geometry.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, if I want to, I can rearrange the order of the modifiers in my stack at any time, and this is really convenient. Perhaps what I really wanted to have was a cylinder that was bent and then twisted, because I know it's going to give me a result that Zach will probably like. Let's see,
okay.
Zach. Let's go ahead and simply click on twist, and I'm going to drag it up above bend, and it will modify the geometry that we're going to see. So we get some weird-looking shape like this. But watch, we don't have quite enough geometry to start making this look really interesting.
No, it's a little too stretched out.
So I can come down here to cylinder, and as I make these changes, and since show end results is turned on, we're going to get to see the final result of how those changes are going to affect this geometry. So let's start adding some more height segments so that we have more detail in here. So let's go ahead and just start upping those.
Oh, that's too cool.
And so now we have some blade-like object that we have
really
just created.
Organic-looking weapon.
And again, if I was to just take this twist, drag it down here between the two, now we've just got, and you can see it, it's just very light. So we've got enough detail in there now to handle the twist without it showing much of a result to the geometry. Then we just get this lightly twisted bent cylinder, and that's exactly what's going on. As a matter of fact, you can see it really well up here with the geometry. And that brings us to another point, and that is having enough detail for some of these modifiers to give you the type results you may be looking for. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's turn off the twist at the moment, and we can come back up here to the bend, and you can see how we've got this gizmo showing basically what the cylinder should be doing. Now, what I can do is come back down here to cylinder, and I can start reducing the number of height segments, and you're going to find that what your geometry will do is do its best to accommodate that gizmo. Okay, so as I start going lower and lower and lower, well, there you go. So now it's a little bit worse. A little bit worse, well actually a whole lot worse. Come back up here to bend. It's doing its best, but it has to have these segments running across this thing for it to be able to bend. We can't bend just where the segments are running straight like this. It's got to be running across.
Makes perfect sense.
So as I continue adding more, if I add one more, it would be able to bend perhaps down here and up here, like such, right there and right there. And as I continue adding, it's going to start getting smoother and smoother. You will get to a point where it's going to be smooth enough. Trust me. All because you can come in here and take your height segments, or whatever segments it is for whatever geometry, and crank those things up and up and up. Here I'm at 89. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous amount of detail.
What difference does it really start to provide? Okay? So let's go ahead and come in here and throw a twist on there, rearrange the twist. Nothing with the exception of a nice, smooth, clean-looking thing.
It's really cool looking. I like that.
Yes, it is. Sometimes you're going to find that you're going to want to apply effects to just particular areas. Okay? And that's going to become important. Let's go ahead and temporarily get the twist out. And on the bend, we'll come back to cylinder for the moment. And we'll start reducing the number of segments in there just to kind of keep things nice and fast here with the old computer. So look at that. As I'm making these changes.
The old computer. I like that.
You can see the changes up here, but down here it's staying just as smooth. I mean, so do we really need that much detail? No.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So now that we've got this, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can select just certain vertices. So I'm going to come up here, and under Selection Modifiers, I'm going to apply a Mesh Select. What the Mesh Select is going to allow me to do is select various sub-objects or components of this piece of geometry right here. And then by leaving that selection in place, modifiers above it will then affect what's selected.
Only that selected area.
So I will expand this, showing me all of the sub-objects of the mesh. Okay, in this case, I've got vertices, edges, faces, polygons. There's a VTM coming up in the near future where we cover all of these things. So we'll come down here to Vertex. So we'll go ahead and select some of the vertices. Let's say maybe to right there. So we've got from here up.
All right.
I will leave this selection in place. Take note over on the right-hand side of your stack that there's no special icons over here. Now let's come up here to Bend. Look at this.
Oh, wow.
So now it's letting us know these little ticks in there, tick marks, little plus marks, that's vertices, showing that we're working on a vertex selection. But, of course, right now our effect is really screwed up. What we might want to do is expand our bend, come down here to our center, because remember, this bend right here is being calculated off of the center. Maybe I'll just take my center and start moving it up.
Oh, that's too cool.
To right there. There we go. And we get a candy cane type effect.
Sure.
Okay. So it's real nice being able to come in here and select sub-objects like that and then apply modifiers just to that sub-object selection. And then if we wanted to, I could simply come out here and just do another mesh select to take me out of a sub-object mode, as you see right here, and then continue on with doing something else, like perhaps maybe come in here and, let's see, what would give us something nice and crazy? Perhaps if we did a taper on the whole thing and put some type of crazy taper on it. As you can see now, we're getting some really weird results. And even weirder if we were to come in here, grab the gizmo, and start moving this all around.
Oh, yeah.
So, as you can see. Or if we wanted to, we could even get even stranger, and we could begin scaling this guy. Let's see if we can come up with something. There we go. And let's see, that's not going to give us anything that way, but we could come in here and squash it down a little bit. So now we've got it nice and thick at the base, and it kind of stretched out at the top. I'm just looking to give you weird results, that's all.
Well, and you did a good job.
And if we wanted to, we could really finish it off with a twist on the whole thing, and then start twisting the top of that.
Oh, that's just too cool.
So there you go, just kind of giving you a basic idea. So these modifiers, very, very powerful. Many of them at your disposal. Now, what I want to do is go ahead and start deleting some of these off and start talking about instancing these different modifiers, or copying them and applying them to other objects. So to delete a modifier, just simply select it, come down here to the garbage can and click to delete. Delete the taper, delete the mesh select, delete the bend, and I'll go ahead and delete this guy as well, and we're left with just our cylinder. Let's go ahead and come back up here. We'll cruise on down, throw another bend on them, bend them on over, and now what I'll do is grab a cylinder, build another cylinder real quickly in the scene, like such. And now, perhaps what I want to do is take the bend modifier that has been applied to this object, copy and paste it over on this object because I'm very happy with the result. Now, granted, this is a very simple modifier here, but maybe I was working with something more complex and didn't want to have to go through the setup process again. What I can do is simply come over here, right-click on the modifier that I'm interested in, and then in the context menu that I am given, I can simply come down here to copy. You see you can also cut as well. I'll copy, select this object, click where I'm going to be interested in inserting it above, right-click, and then I can paste or I can paste instance. And if you remember back in the duplication lesson when we talked about instancing and referencing, instancing gives you that two-way channel of communication. Okay, so let's just paste it at this point in time. So we've pasted it. So now I've got two objects that are bent over in the same direction, but with this one, if I wanted to adjust the direction, if I wanted to adjust the angle, he's completely independent of the other guy.
It's also cool. It actually took the size of the gizmo from the first one.
That's right. So let's go ahead now, delete that out, and since I still have this other modifier copied to the clipboard, I can just right-click again, and this time instead of pasting it, I'm going to do a paste instance. Now, take a look at this. It's italicized. Okay, it's not bold or anything. I'll get to bold in just a minute. In case any of you out there have seen it before, you're about to understand why. So now, when I select this one bend, I see the gizmo on two objects. That's because basically it is the same bend modifier. If I come down here and make an adjustment, I'm actually affecting both guys, just like a regular instance works. It's a two-way street for communications. If I come over here and select this object, and with his bend selected, make an adjustment to the angle, you'll see they're both adjusting as well.
Very cool.
Okay, so let's now go ahead and come back to this guy. We will delete this out, and let's take a look at what happens if I select this geometry, go ahead and shift duplicate it over to the side like such, and I'm going to make it an instance.
Okay.
Go ahead and click OK. Take a look at what's different in our stack. The text is bold. Okay. Anytime you see bold text like that, it immediately lets you know that you're dealing with an instanced object, that the effect to anything on this object right here is going to affect somebody else, anywhere, somewhere in the scene. Okay.
All right.
Meaning if I come back down here to cylinder and start adjusting my radius, I'm affecting both of those guys. If I come up here to my bend, I'm affecting both of these guys.
That is very cool.
The key thing that I want you to understand, though, is that what you're going to see is going to be bold text. Now, if I was to come in here and now grab and copy this bend modifier, come over here to this geometry, right-click, and paste it as instance, what we're going to see here is still just going to be an italicized bend modifier. He's not bold, though, because he's not part of the pipeline that involves other objects that have been instanced.
All right.
But if I come over here to these objects, look what I get. Bold and italicized, letting me know that another piece of geometry somewhere else in the scene that does not have this instanced connection in regards to the geometry itself does have an instanced connection to this bend modifier.
So it's saying this guy has not only an instance object, but somewhere else it's got another object that has an instance version of that modifier.
The bold is letting you know that there's an instance object involved in this whole thing, and he's one of the instance clones. And the fact that he's italicized is letting you know that some other object somewhere in the scene is using an instance copy of this modifier.
There's a very handy way to organize that.
Yep. So one last thing I want to show you in regards to instancing and referencing is what happens when we reference. So let's just go ahead and, you know what, we'll grab this guy. We'll delete him off at the moment. We'll come over here and we'll just kill him out altogether. Select this geometry, shift, move it over to the side, and I'll go ahead and tell it that it's going to be a reference. Okay. And with a reference, what you get is a bar. There's the bar right there. So anything that I come back over to the original object and apply is going to be placed below the bar. Yet anything that I apply to this object after the fact of the duplication is then going to be above the bar. So right now, and also, of course, we're still dealing with bold here because of this connection between other geometry. So I'll simply come down here now, and let's just put a...
Put a twist on it.
All right. Well, let's put a noise on it.
Okay.
And let's
noise is really cool.
Let's tell the noise to be 20, 20, and 20. So it's, a little bit, in fact, we'll go full screen here. So it's starting to get a little messed up there. Let's take our scale down just so that it's a little bit crazier, like such. Now, if I wanted to come back over to this guy and apply a twist, what we will see when we come back to him is going to be the cylinder, the bend, the twist, then this bar, then the noise, which as you see at the moment is not bold because he's not involved in any instancing action that's going on.
Right, and all this goes back to our duplication lesson where we did, we had the example of all the droids where you could take the master droid and change its shape. All the one down below would change, but you could still go to those references and make minor variations in between each one.
Without that information going back to any other object.
Exactly. It's a one-way street of communication.
So we'll come back in here. We'll simply drop this guy down, and let's see. We'll do that twist now. So we'll come on down here. We'll apply a twist modifier, and then we'll start putting the angle on it. And the difference that we have now is this guy has got the noise applied to it. So let's come back over to this object and look at that, just like I described. The cylinder, the bend, the twist, the bar, and the noise. Where now, if we wanted to, we could perhaps come in here and say, look, let's take this cylinder. Let's go ahead and jack up the detail so we get a nice smooth flow like this. And let's come back up here to the noise. and perhaps we can adjust the scale a little bit more, maybe something like that. And to make this guy get a little bit crazier, maybe not quite so much. Let's come down here and tell it we want to animate the noise. So now when we hit play, this guy suddenly comes to life, and the other guy
just sits there.
That
is too cool.
Okay. So it's
awesome.
Definitely some good stuff. So one final thing to make note of, well, actually there's a couple of things. When we are instancing, like we've been doing, in fact, if I take this guy right now and was to, let's go ahead and right-click, let's copy him, let's come over here to this geometry. I'm going to start spacing these guys out a little bit. We're starting to get a little bit tight here. So we'll come back to this object, I'll right-click, I'll go ahead and paste that noise modifier on him. Actually, you know what? I want to paste them on there as an instance. There we go. So now modifications to one will affect the other. Okay, and of course they're both animated as well. But if it gets to a point where you think to yourself, well, I've got everything set up well, but I need to tweak this one guy. I need his flowing appearance to be a little slower, but I don't want to affect the first guy.
Okay.
What I can do is I can make this modifier unique. And I can do that by simply coming down to this button right here, Make Unique, click it. He's no longer italicized.
Oh.
So now if I wanted to, I can come back down here to frequency, turn the frequency way down, hit play now. He's nice and slow. He's still going real fast.
So technically he's not even an instance anymore.
No, he's not at all. Nope, it's his own modifier.
Cool.
Okay. Some other things to note that you may find interesting is the fact that you can, as modifier stacks start to grow, you can move your mouse down here and you can adjust this. This is very handy. And then another thing is you can click this icon right here to configure a series of buttons up here. Watch. I'll just go ahead and click it, and I'll come down here and I'm going to say Show Buttons. Now this goes back to a much older version of 3ds Max where we used to not have the drop-down list. And for those that like to work with the buttons up there, and you can configure your own. They're also put into sets. Right now you're looking at selection modifiers. If you're doing mesh editing, there's mesh editing modifiers.
Oh, okay.
And it's just, you got a whole lot of different things that you can work with. And you can also come up here to configure modifier sets. Here are all of those different sets. Right now we're looking at the mesh editing. And then you can just simply come in and start, tell if you want to add 2 more buttons to the list. And then if you want to start, there's the new buttons we've added. And then click drag over some new modifiers. You can control the way this looks.
Wow, I really like the new way they've got it.
So it's definitely really cool. So we'll go ahead and come in here. I like working with just the drop down. That's cool for me.
Right.
So
Much
we'll
faster.
go ahead and turn off the show buttons. And one final thing. Well, actually, I got 2 final things. This one is pinning. If we want to pin the stack so that we can then start working with other objects, or not working with other objects, but selecting other objects and keeping our current stack pinned from the selected object. If we need to maybe move something out of the way for whatever reason. Now maybe I can see what I was doing a little bit better, or who knows? It all depends on what you're doing at that moment.
So it's almost kind of a way of locking your selection to the stack.
Yeah,
sort of.
So you're keeping your stack locked to the current modifiers you're working with.
That's really cool.
So that's handy. And now for the final thing. The final thing I want to show you is how we can just go ahead and collapse the stack. Once you're happy with what you've got going on. Let's say maybe I'm happy with this guy. I no longer need the stack in place. Then what I can do is simply right-click, and I can just come down to Collapse All. Okay, Collapse All, and it's going to give me a little bit of a warning, just simply letting me know that we're about to remove everything in the stack, and we're just going to be left with an editable mesh, really. I'm just going to go ahead and tell it, yes, I want to continue. And there we are, left with an editable mesh. There is no twist. There is no bend that we can go back in there and that we can modify.
There's not even a cylinder.
No, there's not even a cylinder. If you want to go change the radius now, well, hell, you can't.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might want to make note of that. It did give you the option to hold first if you wanted to hold and then pull it back if need be. I always recommend just simply, if there's a possibility you're going to need to come back into all the modifiers and make an adjustment, just do, if you come up here to File with the object selected, you can come down to Save Selected and just save a copy of that object out. You can get back to it a little bit later. Okay?
Okay.
And with that, that's going to pretty much wrap up everything that I needed to talk about in this lesson right here in regards to the basics of how the modifier stack works.
Very cool.
So thanks a lot, everyone.